I thought taking a vow of poverty was going to get me out of the material rat race forever. And it turned out to be ironically just the opposite, because a couple of years after I joined, our community became insolvent and we fell into bankruptcy because we all hated dealing with money. Who else would take a vow of poverty except folks with some money issues hanging out in their closet?
Have you ever tried to escape something painful, only to find it waiting for you at every door? Doug Lynam took a vow of poverty to leave the chaos of money behind and ended up becoming one of the clearest voices alive on why our relationship with money is really a map of our deepest wounds. This is the Your Next Success podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Sengel. I am a life-first career coach and strategist on a mission to normalize questioning your career, because I believe each of us is made on purpose for a purpose only we can fulfill. The Your Next Success podcast is where we explore how to build a career that truly fuels your life. We talk about self-discovery, smart job search strategies, professional growth, and you will hear stories from people who have navigated big career transitions themselves, so you can create a life-first career and become your own version of authentic success, one that is aligned, meaningful, and truly yours. Doug Lynam is a financial advisor, a best-selling author, and his TEDx talk on the psychology of money has gathered over 400,000 views. His work centers on one conviction: your money problems are almost never about money, and the path to financial freedom runs straight through the childhood wounds you have been carrying your whole life. It is such a pleasure to have had this conversation with Doug Lynam. Let's listen in. Doug Lynam, welcome to Your Next Success.
Hey, thanks, Carolyn. Nice to be here. I'm so honored.
We have the wonderful experience to have actually met each other in person at the NSA meetups, second Saturdays. For those of you in the Raleigh-Durham area, please do come meet Doug, and many, many other amazing people.
It's a great event, a great group, a lot of energy. So if you're into public speaking or want to learn the craft, it's a really robust group of people to learn from and be a part of. Yeah, great to have met you, and you've become a real friend, and I'm really grateful to know you and deepen our friendship. I'm sure it will keep growing over time.
So let's dig into your story. We are going to get to all of the amazing work that you do. You have your 2 books behind you. I'll put your 2 books behind me for just a quick second. It'll be like a fun mirroring, matching event. But you're a TEDx speaker. You've written 2 amazing books, From Monk to Money Manager and Taming Your Money Monster. So we're going to get to all of that, but like automatically. I mean, from monk to money manager. But so we're gonna start at the beginning, though, and kind of go through some of your life, your career transitions, because that's part of what Your Next Success is all about. Everybody's already successful wherever they are.
Yep.
And what would you love to do next? And so let's start it at the beginning, though. Like, where were you born? What was life like?
I grew up in a town called Naperville, Illinois, which is a suburbia about an hour due west of Chicago. And Naperville was a very idyllic kind of Midwestern town to grow up in. People have often ranked it as one of the top places in America to live. It wasn't great for me for a number of reasons. I think when my parents divorced when I was 6 or 7, kind of total warfare broke out in my family. And there was a lot of loneliness and heartache and rejection that came from that when both my parents kind of imploded in their own ways. And I grew up in a relatively affluent home. My dad he was a CEO of a chemical company. My mom was a certified financial planner. But money became the tool that they used for domination and control of the battlefield. So I grew up with a really unhealthy mindset around money. I thought money was dirty and evil and nasty, and it was a thing I wanted nothing to do with because I really saw it as a tool for manipulation and power in ways that were not healthy. You know, my parents, they had enough, but you'd ask, they always play financial chicken. Every time I needed something, you ask my mom, she'd say, well, go ask your dad. You ask my dad, he'd say, well, your mom's got all my money. And then they both play poor. Meanwhile, they're, taking nice vacations and buying new cars every year and living in big houses. So if it was, I think it's kind of the beginning of my origin story around money was developing now what I would call a real money monster, a real avoidant relationship to money and didn't want anything to deal with it. So that's the quick version of the backstory.
Totally.
Okay.
If you're willing.
Go for it.
So do you have siblings?
I do. I have a twin brother, fraternal twin. We don't look at all alike. He's got bright red curly hair that he wears down to his waist. And I've got an older brother, Nicholas. And yeah, so two brothers.
Awesome. So your parents had 3 boys. And what I've learned with my 2 boys is the same input can be completely different output.
Right.
Very interesting how genetics actually works. So you have a fraternal twin, same age, different looks,
Very.
different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the harder struggle for me growing up was, I was born second, and I was a little bit on the. We were both. My mom's like 5 foot, so she had twins, and we were a month and a half premature.
Wow.
And so I think my brother was there for like a week, but I was there for like 3 or 4, and so I just developed a little bit slower. So I was always just developmentally a little bit behind him, and I think that developed a lot of insecurities for me growing up because I always felt like we were being, everyone you're standing side by side and everyone's always comparing the twins. And first of all, we're strikingly different in appearance, but then he would just, he would hit puberty like a year before I did. So yeah, I was always trying to play, I felt like I was trying to play catch up. We were both good students. We both did well. But if I got, an A minus, he'd get an A plus, or I got a B plus, he'd get an A minus, whatever. He was just that little bit, it was just, I always felt like I was not good enough. And so that I think developed a real competitive streak in me that has served me well in many ways, but it also has been a bane of a lot of struggles at the same time.
Thank you for sharing. I think a lot of people haven't done as much work as you have and we're going to get into that as far as like contemplating your place in the world or what this means, or making the time to try to sort out, where does this come from? Who am I? Who do I want to become?
Right.
What is my purpose? What does all this matter? So what I'm hearing is you had a family dynamic in an affluent home where on the outskirts, people looking in might think, they are living the dream.
Right.
This is what successful, nice house, nice family, 3 wonderful boys, different,
right,
etc. And yet from the inside, it feels this internal competitive drive that you adopted on your own. So I was always competing with my brother. I don't know that he was ever competing with me. He's 2 years older. But yeah, just this kind of like, anything he can do, I want to try to do better, but I don't know that I'm doing it better in that.
And then the irony was that because we were always competing with each other all the time, the only way to be sane was to differentiate from each other by doing completely opposite things. So if we did the same thing at the same time, I always felt like I would lose. But if I got a head start in something, I would have a little competitive advantage. Then I could pull ahead. And then I would be in pole position and he wouldn't compete with me or couldn't compete. So basically, he liked something, I didn't like something. I almost defined myself in opposition to him growing up. Yeah. So if he go left, I go right. If he had one interest, I'd pick another. So we weren't in the same lane all the time trying to compete. And that was, I think, really gave us such radically different personalities. In addition to being fraternal twins, you couldn't find 2 siblings that look or act more differently than we do. And it's really quite odd that we're twins.
Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned kind of like being a good student. So what were some of the school subjects that you were fascinated with from an early age? And what are the things outside of school that you started to become driven to exploring?
In school, I really liked anything in the social sciences, history, psychology, sociology. I liked English class a lot, but the problem with social studies classes, I found them too easy. So I didn't take it seriously because they just came so naturally to me. Whereas other classes were a lot harder, the math, science and things. But writing, books have always been an important part of my life. I've been an avid reader my whole life. So it's really fun to see myself as an author now because I was kind of the geeky kid who would cram through a sci-fi book a day in the summers and spend a lot of time in the video games hiding out. So
what video games?
Oh, and gosh, all of them. There's one called Might and Magic or Doom or
That's cool. I mean, I
Geez,
started back with like Pong.
yeah, I remember Pong and
And you like hurt
Atari.
the center of your hand to try to like move that joystick around.
We've got 85K on this Atari. Like, oh my gosh.
Exactly. Okay, so books wise, you liked sci-fi. Were there any other kind of genres that, I guess kind of
Anything escapist. I used to read to escape. That was my entertainment. So fantasy novels, the Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff, or Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, Orson Scott Card, all those biggies.
Okay, so pre 6 or 7, you may not have even been consciously aware, but sometime during childhood, what did you think success meant from what you viewed in the world around you? Did you have an early definition of what you thought it was to be a successful member of society or successful adult?
Yeah, I grew up just very lost and confused. Like success, I think, meant going to school, going to college, getting a good degree. Those pressures were real. And at the same time, I had a father figure who was successful, parents who were successful by all the external measures, but were not happy internally. So I just didn't know that's probably what drove the monastic impulse is just, let's just get out of the game entirely because this whole thing feels rigged. What am I going to do? Go join the corporate world and get a career and get the pension and be as miserable as my parents are? That doesn't seem great. And I didn't see a lot of good models out there. So I think I grew up feeling pretty lost and confused, especially without any real parental guidance. We were in many ways just emotionally abandoned as kids. When my parents divorced, the first thing my mom did was hire a full-time live-in nanny. So we lost our dad and we lost our mom. There was we didn't have parents essentially. So it was just like, what are we doing here? Well, I don't grow up and have a family and have the kids and have the career. Well, that sounds awful. So I think it was just a lot of confusion more than any clear direction.
Did you realize that your parents were unhappy?
Oh, that was obvious. Sure. I mean, my mom, and I have a wonderful, as I got older, my relationship with my parents changed into something very beautiful and healthy. And my mom's a wonderful human being. But I don't think she would mind if I say that she basically had a complete breakdown at that point. I mean, imagine being a young mother with 3 boys and now being on your own and trying to, particularly in her generation, that was when divorce wasn't common yet.
Yeah.
Maybe in the early 80s. And then my dad, had a drinking problem, and you could see him coming home every night, pounding back a couple of Manhattans every evening to, deal with his stressors, and certainly had some other substance issues as well. So I didn't, it was obvious that things weren't going great.
And you had this real longing for some sort of connection or desire to want to find out, what's this all about? But yet in the same moment, the immediate needs that you had were just, you're like, did you view yourself as maybe I'm a problem? Or did you view yourself as I want to get the heck out of here because this isn't it? Yeah.
Both. A, I'm a problem. B, because back then ultrasounds were fairly new. They didn't know, my parents didn't know they were having twins until a week before we were born.
Oh, wow.
And they actually didn't expect me to survive. My dad would tell this story with somewhat sadistic glee. I was like, how we got our family names. And he's like, well, and I was like, well, we named you Doug because we didn't want to waste a good name on you. Because we thought the doctor said, you got to name him quick because he's not going to make it. So they gave me, they named me after my mom's older brother, who she always resented and hated.
What?
And all my brothers got named after, so all my brothers are named after my dad's side of the family. I got named after my mom's side of the family because they just didn't want it. That was a throwaway name. Well, we'll use that one up and then it'll be out of the queue.
Oh, Doug.
So here I was the runt.
Reach through and give you a little hug or something buddy.
So sort of the runt. I was unexpected, and I just think I always felt my mom loves me to pieces,
right?
But I don't think my dad knew how to love anybody, including himself, which was the hard part. And definitely felt like it was my older brother had this expectation. All the family expectations got put on my older brother, and by the time it came to me, there was no expectations. We don't expect anything from you. You're just kind of whatever, you're kind of there.
So you go through high school, there is some expectation for some sort of college, but and you're kind of interested in reading and all of that. But I think there were some other activities you started to
to get into, or like, what was your first job? Even did you even need to get a job? I mean,
I did. I had to get a job because my parents wouldn't give me any money. So my first job was mowing lawns in the neighborhood, and then my first real job, beyond first paycheck, I even through high school, I worked all through high school. I worked first at a Baskin Robbins for a few years. That was one of my favorite jobs, actually. All the ice cream you can eat. So
did it hurt your wrist though? I feel like those people are getting carpal tunnel.
I got my first job in a Baskin Robbins, and then I worked in a Wendy's after that. I didn't like that very much, but yeah, if I want, like, that was one of my frustrations. Like, here I am in a relatively affluent family, and like for my first car, I had to go out and work. I had to buy it myself. I had to buy everything myself because there wasn't. It was just anything I needed was a fight. Even like new shoes, it was a fight. And so I saw a lot of my friends who were maybe more middle class, and they would have things that I didn't, because their parents were just a little bit more generous with the resources they had.
Did your brother also have to fight for stuff too?
Oh, it was
like at least that's even-ish.
Right. It's definitely, there was no discrimination on that front.
So then how did you decide, as you're kind of getting ready to graduate?
Well, they wouldn't even pay for college. I couldn't get my dad to pay for college for much of it either. It was like everything was a fight. Like it was, so.
So against that obstacle and odd though, like then how did you decide that you were even going to go to college, and then what to do?
Well, that's a good question. So that's why I went to a very unusual school. I ended up going to a place called St. John's College, which is called the Great Book School. They have a campus in Annapolis, Maryland, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I spent time at mostly Santa Fe. But it's called the Great Book School because there's only about 400 students in the undergrad program. It's a spinoff from the University of Chicago. And the way it works is you have 4 core classes, all 4 years. You've got math, science, 4 years of language. The first 2 years are ancient Greek, next 2 years are modern French. And then your big course is called your seminar. It's your main anchor course. And that's your literature, your philosophy. And so you study all of those subjects in chronological order, starting with the Greeks and Romans in your freshman year, from original source texts only, all the way up to the 20th century in your senior year. So when you're doing the math curriculum, you're learning math from Apollonius, Euclid, Galileo, Newton, Einstein, right? There's no textbooks. It's just the original sources of the original authors. So it's sort of the Marine Corps of the mind, if you will.
Yeah.
So the boot camp for your brain, where you're forced to master all these different disciplines in a very deep way and be able to figure it out for yourself without any lectures or textbooks telling you what to think.
How did you even realize that was an option, that sort of school existed and it was an option?
Well, there used to be a thing called I don't know if it's still around. It's called the Fisk Guide to Colleges. It was the biggie in my day, and you could get this big tome, and I just read it cover to cover, and I flagged every unusual school that was different and alternative that I could find. Like, my parents were pushing me to go to University of Illinois, big state school. Like, everybody I knew all my classes. If you were a good student, you just went to University of Illinois. There wasn't nobody thought much about it. It was just the school to go to. And I felt like there's an old Rush song, if you know the band Rush. They have a song called Subdivisions, but it's a story about living in suburbia in middle America and how awful it is, and how it's cookie cutter. Everything is cookie cutter. I just felt like I was being pressed into this mold all the time, and I just rebelled against it. So I knew if I wanted to go out of state, which I desperately wanted to pick a school that was at least 5 states away from where my parents lived. And so that was my goal, was to get the hell out of Illinois. But because of the financial struggles, I had to pick a school that was different enough that I could convince my parents to chip in like, how am I going to pay for this? I still had to pay for part of it, but I did blackmail my parents eventually to helping out a little bit, or quite a bit actually. But what would justify the out-of-state tuition, and what would be different enough that I couldn't get it at University of Illinois? And that was what St. John's offered. And I'm a book lover, and I always had my head up a book. So it felt like going home, the perfect school it's like where geeks unite.
That's awesome. Now, also, I think in high school, you started spending time at some friend's house, and your experience in that family and with those friends was a little bit different. Do you
Oh
know what
yeah,
I'm
it is.
talking about?
Oh yeah, I do.
I think
Oh
that
yeah.
this experience, like your experience, and I'd like you to tell a little bit more about
Hmm.
that, but like that also starts shaping who you're becoming.
Yeah, my best friend was a guy named Steve Olson. I haven't talked to him in decades. I don't know what happened to him, but he had a family. He was my best friend in high school for a long time. And, we always, as kids, do sleepovers at kids' houses, but I would always sleep over at my friends' houses every chance I could get. And I never had anyone sleep over at my house. Like, I wanted out, and there was no way I was going to bring a friend into that chaos or
Yeah.
that dysfunction. So if I could sleep over at someone's house, I did. And his family was really warm and gracious and welcoming. And his parents were lovely human beings. And his family was very evangelical. They were a conservative evangelical Christian home, and there were a lot of good things that went with that, like taking in stray puppies like me. They just kind of like were very loving and fed me and sheltered me, and they did that for lots of people, strangers on the street. They meet hitchhikers and take them in, and so they had this warm, generous heart and a warm family. And so I was really drawn to that. And they were like, well, you're sleeping over all the time. We're going to church tomorrow. Do you want to come? I'm like, well, sure. I mean, anything to not go home. So I started going to church with them on Sundays and eventually decided to join their community. And it was a very evangelical Christian environment. And, with all the negativities that come with that, but also some real positives that went with that. And so the nice thing about the evangelical community is all you got to do is say the magic words, and I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And now you're in the club, and now you've got a family, and now you've got a tribe, and now you've got belonging, and you've got connection, and you've got community. And that was really appealing to me. So I went down that rabbit hole for a few years in high school. And it served me well because it also kept me from, the kind of moral purity codes, it kept me out of some trouble. It kept me from all the, fire and brimstone stuff, as awful as it is. At least it gave me some structure, and it gave me some direction and told me what to do and what not to do. And not all of that is bad. Some of it's quite good.
Yeah.
And it came with some theology that I found over time deeply problematic, particularly at that time, the way they treated people of other races and the way they treated, people who were gay or people who were different. That kind of like, if you don't look like us, you don't act like us, you don't think like us, you're going to be cast into the fire for eternity. It's like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I did grow out of that, but it was a phase I went through, and that's the story.
And so your own parents, was there any religious anything?
Nothing. I mean, my mom took us to church once in a while for Easter and Christmas.
What kind of church did she take you to?
She took us to the United Church of Christ, which is a really good church. I respect it a great deal, but we would go occasionally and do some summer school stuff, summer camp stuff. Once they had the summer camp that we'd go to once in a while. That was fun. But other than that, there was no guidance.
Connection. It wasn't a relationship.
Right. My parents couldn't give us what they didn't have themselves. So they lacked that depth or that connection. So they didn't really able to pass it on to us.
Now, I've heard from, so I'm cradle Catholic, ended up helping out with the baptism program and trying to help new parents choose whether or not that was the right time for them and their families to bring their kids into the church, right? And so one of the things that was said was sometimes it's kind of hard to consider that there's this loving, forgiving Father in heaven if your lived experience is challenging and you don't see those elements in your own Father on earth.
100%. We tend to project our parental issues onto God, like whatever our daddy issues are, or even our mommy issues, particularly our daddy issues, we tend to project that onto the Father in heaven, and then that can deeply distort our theology and our relationship to the divine.
Interesting. Okay. And so you're realizing this. And I also was kind of like curious, like your friend that at that phase, that was such a welcoming house at Steve's house. Like, there's that song, and they'll know we are Christians by our love. Like, did you know they were Christians by their love? Like, did that actually?
I did. So they're giving them credit. Like they were a wonderful family. I have nothing. But there was this other piece to the community they were a part of that
became not aligned.
Right.
Yeah.
See any problem in that household, but I did see it in the wider community that they were a part of.
I see. Yeah.
Or, well, that's actually not true. What really I did see in that household was a lot of sexism. That really did, that sense
Oh.
of the father is in charge, the mother is subservient, the wife is subservient to the husband. And that was like a really big deal for their household. And that often chafed at me. Because I'm being raised by a single mom, women have to have this role. There was a disconnect between what I saw in my own home. In some ways was positive, seeing my mom step up and be in the workforce and, actually take those roles on. So that sexism is part of it, I did see, but I did see a lot of racism, not in them, but in the wider community, and homophobia and everything else that I'm just like.
So,
yeah.
But what we have some themes here of, you have this quest for knowledge, this quest for trying to get to original sources, this quest for human connection, and this real, like, when somebody is meeting you in a way that is compassionate and is kind and is loving and accepting, then you're like enjoying that bit of peace and rest for a moment.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now you go.
And they made great strawberry jam, by the way. I remember that every Sunday morning. At any rate.
Oh yeah, we had some neighbors that did like canning and all of that too, and it was just like, wow.
And some pancakes.
Imagine what your life would be like if your career aligned with who you are, what you do best, and actually fueled the life you want. At Next Success, we support all ages and stages through career transitions, from students exploring majors or careers to job seekers actively searching or reimagining their next move to professionals committed to self-awareness and leadership growth. Stay connected and explore what's possible at nextsuccesscareers.com and follow Next Success Method on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
Okay, so now how do you get from St. John's College to then a chapter that kind of came after that, I think? But what came right after St. John's College, and how did that become part of your horizon of what you wanted to sign up for?
Well, it was actually kind of during college.
Okay.
Actually, I went to officer candidate school with the Marine Corps. So I signed up for the Marines.
Like, how did that come on your...
Well, I showed up to St. John's a long-haired hippie. That was my way. So after the evangelical stage, I went to a hippie stage. Well, there was a metal stage, then there was the Christian stage, then there was the hippie stage.
Awesome.
And I think what happened to me at St. John's, I finally was able to, first of all, be free from my brothers, whom I love deeply, but a lot of my identity was just kind of a little bit of playing follow the leader with my older brother and my twin, trying to fit in a little bit. And they went that long-haired route, and I just I'll guess this is the thing we all do. And it was a great way to really annoy our parents. So we all kind of joined in. And I remember it was a long story with the car, but basically my mom remarried a guy we didn't get along with. And so to really annoy him, we painted a rainforest mural on the side of our car and a big peace symbol on the hood, and just made it as wild and crazy hippie mobile as we could to just be an eyesore in the front yard. But so that was kind of how I showed up at college. And then I got a little disillusioned with that. I saw in the supposed wannabe hippie movement at the time, such as it was, we weren't real hippies by any means, but that culture was a lot of selfishness, and you talk about peace and love and all that stuff, but it's really just about me doing what I want to do when I want to do it, and nobody tell me how to live my life, which isn't all bad, but the flakiness of it and I think I have this almost, what do you call it? Not counterphobic, but how my therapist named it once. And besides being ADHD, it's not codependent, it's counterdependent. Like, some people are really codependent on the people they're around. I tend to be counterdependent. Whatever you are, I kind of go, because of my twin brother thing, I always kind of go the other direction. And so now I find myself in this really sort of hippie community of geeks, and I'm like, and I kind of now what's the opposite of this? And then because it's a, one of my favorite t-shirts from St. John's College is they had this t-shirt back in the day. It's not true anymore. It said, great books, St. John's College, great books, no gym. Right. So they didn't even have a gym at this school because it's like, there's no sports.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the sports culture, which I really rebelled against. So I loved it there. But then once I got there, I felt like now I'm feeling we're all the same. So now what's the opposite of this? And I think the headiness of it was overwhelming. And it's like, well, what would balance this out in some weird cosmic way? Like, and what would be a physical challenge that would be the counterpoint to the mental challenge? I signed up for Officer Can School with the Marines. And the reason I picked the Marines is because you can do their training and there's no commitment. You're not locked in until you actually get pinned, as they say, you get your bars and you complete the training. So I kind of wasn't sure I was going to ever make a career out of it, but I did think of it very seriously at many times. But I ended up going during my summers between my sophomore and junior year, and then again during my junior and senior year, off to Quantico, Virginia, and spent the summers training with the Marines. I finished near the top of my class, and I had a blast. I mean, I look back on it, it was one of the great adventures of my life. And I also had a good mentor at the time, a professor of mine who had served in Vietnam. And while I was going through the list, he's like, hey, you need to read the history of the Marines really well if you're going to do this. And so he kind of gave me every book on the Vietnam War history to read and make sure I was going in with my eyes open. So and I've always been a bit of a history buff, although I can never remember dates to save my life. And then I kind of had this question, this real burning question. Like, I loved the Marines. I trusted the Marine Corps. I trusted the leadership, but I didn't fundamentally trust the political leadership that was directing and guiding the Marine Corps. I wasn't convinced that we weren't going to repeat the same mistakes of Vietnam again. And this was in the late 90s. Clinton was president. There weren't any active conflicts. And I decided at that point that and I also realized that unresolved anger issues and high explosives were a bad combination. And maybe I didn't need to go blowing people up around the world to get at my daddy issues. So it actually turned out to be I think a pretty wise choice, because the second Iraq War popped up right after that. And I would have certainly been deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan or both, which I think history has shown that that's just another Vietnam writ large.
So you didn't end up signing on to be part of the Marines for longer? You didn't get the pin?
I finished all the training.
The pin.
So after I finished the training, they sent me back to St. John's to finish my senior year. I hadn't finished my degree. So to become an officer, you need two things, the training and the degree.
Okay.
So I had this whole year to sit on this decision and wrestle with it. It was a really hard year for me for that reason, but ultimately decided to turn my commission down, which I don't know anyone else who's ever done that. So yeah, it was a hard call, but I really had to dig deep and just decide. But the harder realization was how much I enjoyed the Marines in a weird way. It was like the Marines teach you to be good at your job, and your good job is to kill people. And so it essentially is training you to enjoy the process of combat. And I think there's something primal in all of us that can resonate with that. It's why we love action films and violent movies, and it's the reason we're the dominant species on the planet. We got here for a reason, because we're the most vicious predator out there. And to see that impulse inside myself, to see that the shadow side of my own personality was very, very revelatory, and also realize that maybe this isn't something an impulse I need to feed, and maybe there's a better way forward.
Gotcha. So you recognize this shadow side, kind of deciding, I don't think that's what I want to be acting on, and the skepticism of the leadership if we'd really learned our lessons. And so you paused on that. But then what did you decide? How did you move forward after graduating?
Well, I had a good mentor in college who was my thesis advisor, and we were talking a lot about my deep spiritual quests that I was on, the sort of existential dilemmas and questions that I was searching for answers for. And suggested that, you might want to look at this thing called monasticism. And and invited me to join a community there in Santa Fe that was really quite beautiful in many ways. So I didn't go into a monastery with any faith. I wasn't raised Catholic or with any real spiritual guidance, but I thought it was also, if I was going to leave the Marines, what would be a higher calling? What would give me all the things I loved about the Marines, the esprit de corps, the camaraderie, the sense of purpose, the ideas of service, but maybe with a higher calling, a higher purpose than what the Marines offered. So I thought of it really as an experiment. It was going to be like grad school. I was going to go try it for a year or two and try it out. It was also a great way to really flabbergast my parents and annoy them to no end, because they couldn't have picked a lifestyle choice that was more antithetical to the way I was raised. So I thought I'd just escape the world of money, materialism, and all of it, and just give that a shot for a bit and see where it would take me. It ended up being a 20-year adventure, and in many ways it was fantastic. Plus there's free haircuts, and the robes are super soft, so there's some perks. But
so you decide to become a monk. Now, how does that work? You just show up one day at a monastery and you're like, knock, knock, knock. Hello, do you have room for one more? Or do you have to make an appointment? How does it work to actually enter and stay for a while? It's just such a unknown world to me.
Well, there's an application process. There's a postulant, they call it the postulancy, where you present yourself to the community to see if you're fit. And then there's levels of vows. So you kind of take temporary vows for the first, anywhere from 4 to 7 years. And you kind of re-up each year to see if you want to really make this a serious commitment, how committed you are, and whether you like the community and whether the community likes you. So usually you go for like a week or two, try it out, you go away, then you come back for 6 months, go away, and then come back more long-term is typically how it works. And so I basically kind of just jumped into the deep end for a lot of reasons and tried it out. And I did the temporary vows. And then after a few years, I actually ended up going full tilt and full bore and took my permanent vows and decided that this was going to be the way I wanted to live my life. Didn't actually turn out quite the way I expected, but there were some real twists along the way.
And so did you end up becoming Catholic while you were a monk? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's kind of like entering in on all sorts, right? You got all sorts. Is there a sacrament for becoming a monk?
There's an ordination ceremony. A priest and monks are very, very, very different, but there's a similar sort of ordination process that you go through, absolutely. And I was really honored to have Father Richard Rohr say the Mass at my ordination ceremony, which was really a really meaningful moment in my life. And he became a good friend over the years.
How did you first meet him?
Well, through my ordination, he just happened, for various connections, he agreed to preside Mass over the ceremony. And I didn't know much of him, but that's really where I got to meet him, because he knew the other brothers very well. And that's how that connection first came about.
And did you learn about the Enneagram before or after meeting Richard Rohr?
After. He was really the one who introduced me to it. I didn't know anything about it up until that point. And so he was my first introduction. But I didn't take the Enneagram that seriously until I left the monastery, oddly enough.
Interesting.
I always had a bit of a skepticism around it because I couldn't really figure out the why behind it. Everyone would say, well, here's how it works. I was like, well, why does it work? And I couldn't really get a good answer. So I was always kind of in that's an interesting tool, and that was one of the things I really explored in my book. I had to figure that out for myself first before I could really adopt it as a meaningful rubric for understanding personality structure.
Okay. So just to catch people up, what is the Enneagram?
Okay. Well, the Enneagram it's a personality typology. The word Enneagram, Ennea in Greek means 9, and gram means drawn. And so it's really these 9 archetypes of personality that we typically draw. Think of it like a color wheel. If you were to draw a color wheel and divide it up into 9 pie slices, then there's your personality tends to fall on a range somewhere in one of those quadrants with infinite hues and shades and textures that are possible. And it doesn't tell you everything about your personality because your personality has many components to it. you have a nurture and a nature. Like your nurture is how you're raised, and your nature is your DNA. So it just explains kind of the nurture portion of your personality, how you were raised in your childhood environment, what some of the way your ego formed to protect you from the biggest stressors in that environment, and what were the coping mechanisms you developed and some of those defenses, which got you through childhood, but maybe causing some difficulty in your adult life.
So you become introduced to the Enneagram through Richard Rohr, although it was after the monastery that became something that you picked up more.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's go back. So now you're in the monastery, and at first the initial part is like, I'm going to escape money and I'm going to escape these other things. This community seems kind of cool. You sign up for a while, you're there. And what do monks actually do while they're in the monastery? Of course, there's got to be a component of like praying for people in the world. But then what? Because I was kind of surprised in your book that you mentioned you were also working. And I'm like, wait, what? Like that, I didn't, help me understand.
Yes.
All those.
So there's plenty of chanting and prayer and meditation and services and all the things you would typically expect in a monastery. But we were a Benedictine order, and so we were also a teaching order. So we taught in a local private school, and that was kind of one of the ways we brought income into the community. And I was working as the chair of the math department at that school. So I was teaching math and also some science, and then down the road, economics and personal finance, because that became something I got really interested in.
Yeah. So how did you become interested in finance and personal finance? Because it's like, on one hand, you're like, I thought you're supposed to be running away from having to worry about money.
Right.
And then what happened?
Well, I really, I thought taking a vow of poverty was going to get me out of the material rat race forever. And it turned out to be, ironically, just the opposite. Because a couple of years after I joined, our community became insolvent and we fell into bankruptcy because we all hated dealing with money. Who else would take a vow of poverty except folks with some money issues hanging out in their closet? So a lot of very smart, successful, well-educated individuals still couldn't get the financial side of our community together because we just, so there were a number of what I call money monsters roaming around the halls of our monastery, all taking different shapes, sizes, and forms. But essentially, it was this idea that if we're doing good in the world, we're serving God, we're loving our neighbor as ourselves to the best of our ability, and that somehow God was going to come and take care of all of it for us. It was all going to magically work out. So there was some magical thinking, there was some delusional thinking, there was a lot of avoidance, and then just some poor investment. I'd say poor allocation choices of resources that eventually led us to a point where we couldn't. It was a struggle to put food on the table and keep the roof over our heads. And somebody had to go sort that mess out. And I was the youngest, most junior monk at the time. And so for whatever naive reason, I was like, throw me in, coach. I raise my hand. I'll fix it. I'll take care of this. And, people-pleasing behavior or whatever. And I didn't know what I was financially illiterate at the time. I didn't have any idea what I was doing. But I figured the bar was set so low, I couldn't do a worse job than my predecessor. So at least I was going to put the hours in and try it out. And that's really what got me to realize that the material life and the spiritual life are not incompatible. In fact, they have to go together because you can't feed the hungry or clothe the naked or tend to the sick without money in your pocket. Unless you can master the miracle of multiplying the loaves and fishes, you really can't do much. It's hard to do good works in the world without the resources to back it up. Otherwise, it's just good intentions. So I realized as the monastery had a lot of good intentions, but we struggled to actually put them into practice because we didn't have the money to do it. And that made me realize that these two worlds have to come together in order to live the fullest life that you want to live.
And so how did you start tackling that?
Well, that's a long story, but basically, first of all, getting your profit and loss sheet kind of straight, getting your budget figured out, what's coming in, what's coming out. And eventually, bankruptcy cleared out some of our debts. And then a lot of it was better money management, better cash flow, understanding, increasing the cash flow, and then tightening up in places where we were bleeding money. And basically trying to get us back to at least somewhere where we were, not in the red. And then, but it was a 2.5 year process to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you bring in money aside from the income that you guys earn as teachers? I mean, do you then go solicit donations or do you host retreats
Yep.
and charge or what else? Because there's a lot of stuff that happens within the Catholic Church that it's like, oh, there's a suggested donation.
Right.
But it's just a suggestion.
At some point, it needs to stop being a suggestion and more of a direct ask. Like a lot of it was just not asking, just giving without any expectation of return. And then in many cases being taken advantage of at times, where you need to be a little more upfront with people saying, yes, and, here's what we expect, and being able to, actually bring some money into the community so people don't make assumptions that we have these infinite resources that you can just, feed off of.
So you turned that around in 2.5 years. Now, I'm also kind of curious because mentioned a lot, well, yeah, particularly in the Taming Your Money Monster, but like, where did your fascination of cars come in?
It didn't, with cars.
You just utilized analogies of cars because it made sense. Because I'm like, wait, you were kind of near indie-ish, but not.
Yeah.
But like, was there? Okay, so no fascination with cars, but utilizing lots of examples of cars while describing certain money monster types by taking the Enneagram plus your money knowledge and making it into a way that people can, I guess, relate to.
Yeah, I was actually sort of frustrated when I realized that the car metaphors that are weaved throughout the book were, the problem is I had a lot of mixed metaphors when I did the first draft. I was using this metaphor and that metaphor and that metaphor. And the car one just worked really well to describe, what kind of ego you're driving around in. And so to describe your Enneagram type, and it worked so beautifully that I kind of got trapped with it. And I'm happy with it. I'm really thrilled with how it worked out. But I'm not really a car guy, to be honest with you.
So you become this money manager in the monastery. You also are teaching some finance things to students in the school.
Right.
And things seem to be going kind of swimmingly. You get everybody out of debt. You're in a great community. And then what happens? Like, what questions do you start having, or how does that kind of pivot and change? Of course, everyone changes over a 20-year time frame.
Yeah.
But how did you kind of grow and evolve? And then what did that lead to then?
Yeah. Well, first of all, our school didn't offer any personal finance or economics classes. And so I was like, this is a real lack that we're sending all these kids out into the world financially illiterate like I was. And then it creates all this suffering for people. So those were elective courses I invented, so to speak, or offered. And then a lot of things happened. I would say there were two the pivotal moment was just realizing that our community was dying, that there were no new, brothers coming to join. And I was still, after 20 years, the youngest person in the room, and that at some point this community is just going to age out. And it also became kind of very, what we call, say, sclerotic or just calcified. The decision-making process wasn't as democratic, I would say, as it could have been. And there was real resistance to change, for the community to change in a way so it could grow and become more sustainable. And I realized if I stay another 20 years, I'll be the last one here to turn out the lights. And that just isn't a life I want to be living. And I also felt like I wasn't growing. You could describe it as an analogy for folks. It's sort of like a marriage. It can start off really well, and then over time, the relationship can deteriorate. And it probably somewhere after year 10, things started to get a little uncomfortable. And I thought, well, I'll just stick it out. I made my vows, I made my commitments. I'm going to see this through to the end. And then I realized over time, it just got more, the community became increasingly dysfunctional, and I couldn't make the changes. I had no power to basically steer things in a different direction, and the community was going to fall apart. So I had to go find a different path.
I think this is such a real thing that people can experience anywhere
Yeah.
in their corporate life, in a home life,
Yeah.
anything where it's like you're there and you try to power through and you try to push through. And whether it's a vocation like being a monk or whether it's being part of a company for 10 or more years, it's like after a while you start pointing out problems and that can backfire. At least in my own corporate experience, pointing out the problem because I wanted them to be changed. Nobody else banded around and joined in and was like, yes,
Right.
thank you. Let's tackle that. It was more like you pointed out a problem. Now you're the problem.
Right.
And then that became increasingly uncomfortable, but I got to go home.
Right.
But if you're serving in a community, that is home.
Right.
So seems like that could just kind of compound and
And I never was really able to tame these money monsters. One of them that I saw was this idea that money is inherently corrupting or evil or bad. And so here I am dealing with it all the time. It kind of made me suspect in the community in a ways that my efforts weren't always appreciated, even though the fruits of those labors were deeply, appreciated.
Yeah.
But the work itself wasn't always. And so I felt I was at this real disconnect in terms of like, why are you worrying about this thing all the time? And why are you, well, because if we don't, somebody's got to do it. And it felt like our values just grew further and further apart.
So how does somebody go about the process of unbecoming?
Well, it's just a decision you make. It's a bit like a divorce and a marriage. You just say one day you can leave anytime you want. There's no locks on the doors, but it was a very difficult process, and it took some time, and there was some compromises made to try to keep me to stay. And it was like, well, we'll do this, we'll do that. It was like, all right, well, I'll stick it around for another 6 months to see if things get better, and they didn't. It didn't work. I couldn't see myself staying in that role any longer because it was just so psychologically dysfunctional, and even at times what I felt would be even abusive. And I just realized I was not happy and I was not fulfilling my deepest purpose in life. And I had some gifts to give to the world and a life to live. And so it was very hard because it's sort of like leaving the Amish or something like that. You can go, but then you have to leave everything behind. You're leaving your community, your family, your career, everything, your social, everything you have to leave behind. And so that's what made it so difficult to transition away. But eventually I made the decision and glad I did.
So the pain of staying the same finally became greater than the pain of leaving, even though that's the loss of, an identity, a vocation, the community. And still you felt this deep calling that, this is what I need to be doing. And so you embark on that new journey. But then what happened?
Well, good things happened mostly. I mean, it took some time, but I decided to then go into finance and become an investment advisor and help relieve the suffering that I saw from poor financial decisions that people make. And I focused first on retirement plans, 401ks, 403bs, moved into individual wealth management at a firm in Santa Fe. And my story was unique enough that it got picked up by the New York Times. And so there was a feature-length article about me in the New York Times in the business section on the cover that went viral. That got me a 2-book deal from HarperCollins, and things kind of really, took off. It was fits and starts, but I did manage to, build a really successful career out of it.
And then along the way, you also became a TEDx speaker. You also help all sorts of people. So fascinating. And then what happened? Because you were there in New Mexico and now you're here in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And like you had mentioned before that, you can do something and it can be great for a while.
Yeah.
And then you have an urge to kind of start a new chapter or do something different. But help catch us up. And then what happened with you?
I did meet a beautiful, wonderful lady and fell in love and got married. And we had what we call a pandemic marriage. Some people have pandemic puppies. We had a pandemic marriage. And so we The pandemic pushed us together a little faster than was prudent. And then when that ended, the relationship ended for a number of reasons. Some of them were entirely my fault. And basically, it went through a very hard divorce. And then I decided to take, and then I had the second book to write with HarperCollins. And I needed some time. So I took a sabbatical for 2 years and wrote my second book, got that out in the world, and then realized that I felt Santa Fe had been home for almost 34 years, and I needed a shift. I needed something completely different. And, without a lot of the emotional triggers and some of the baggage that was there. So I decided to move out to North Carolina to be closer to my family. My mom's here, my brother's here. I have my twin brothers just north up in New York. So it really decided that family was really important to me after having kind of neglected it for so long. And I also wanted to be out of the desert and wanted to be, in a slightly more vibrant. Well, Santa Fe is a great town, but it's small. It's 65,000 people in the city, 85 in the county. And it's also it's one of the poorest states in the nation. And in terms of client base, it's really limited. And so
Gotcha.
I realized that this was a better opportunity to grow my practice. And I'm now with an amazing firm called Course Management Investment Advisors here in Pinehurst, which I'm really thrilled to have joined. I love their investment strategies, are really spot on. It's a great team. And so it was really a way to just reboot one more time. And hopefully
That's
one last
awesome.
time. I hope there isn't another, but you never know.
So now you are holistically living into what you believe you're made for, making great contributions, being closer to your family, enjoying this time with them, doing great work for people in the community. How do you define authentic success for you now?
I think that's a hard one. Authentic success is serving my clients well, doing a good job for them, helping them, manage the ups and downs of their financial life, the emotional side of it, as well as the mathematical side of it. And that's number one, to offering great customer service. And then also being able to have the time in my day to have control over that's a nice part about my practice is I get to be completely autonomous and design my day however I want. That's going to, move the ball forward, whatever is important to me today. And then it gives me the space to keep writing and keep thinking and exploring and, deepen my spiritual practice and finding creative ways to be of love and service to the world around me. So it's been a big adjustment coming out here, and I'm still kind of finding getting my feet under me right now, but I'm finding community, I'm finding friends, and it's been a positive shift for me.
Well, you're super fascinating. I'm so grateful to have met you and to be able to call you a friend, definitely. So I highly recommend anyone who is wanting to explore what it could look like to have a better financial future and to really understand their present to engage with Doug, call him up, find out, or there's 2 amazing books, From Monk to Money Manager and Taming Your Money Monster. And this is Taming Your Money Monster is the one that takes the Enneagram approach and looks specifically through a financial lens. And I know that you're an excellent practitioner of helping others on all facets. So how can people find you?
My business website, I'm at Course Management Investment Advisors in Pinehurst, North Carolina. You can also go to my personal website, which is DougLynam.com, DougLynam.com. And there you can find resources to my TEDx and my books as well. And all my social media handles are at Doug Lynam. So take your pick. They're all out there.
Well, thank you so, so much, Doug. I'm so excited for having you on the show, and I wish you the most amazing next success ever.
Thanks, Carolyn. Appreciate it a lot.
Thanks for listening to Your Next Success with Dr. Carolyn Sengel. Remember, authentic success is yours to define and includes aligning your career to support the life you want.